Not long ago, someone commented on a post that they thought I was soulless. And the reason was because I had written a post about a famous person. And I've written a few about Bruce Willis, Selena Gomez, Jordan, a couple others. And I wanted to explain myself because I can understand why there's people out there that think that that might be the case, that I'm trying to get attention, trying to exploit. But I think I have a good reason, and I'm going to try to convey why. So first, I've spent about a decade chasing the answer for this. And when I first started out, it wasn't by choice. I'm in this game because a dentist, a TMJ dentist, had drilled my back teeth because it was his philosophy or whatever in 2014. And I went from being relatively healthy to having neurological issues and not being able to function, not being able to retain information. And at that time, I saw a side of life that I'd never really seen. I'd always had a pretty easy life. And all of a sudden, everything I'd taken for granted was no longer true, right? All of a sudden, I couldn't perform on my job. All of a sudden, I was very bad at relationships and I didn't want to go out of the house and I felt like a hermit. These are all things that were completely counter to how I had lived my adult life, and I was already in my late 30s. And when I was in that world, this new world for me, I saw a very dark side that I'd never really seen before because I didn't have to see it, right? And I began hanging out on TMJ Facebook groups, which were very popular at the time, and seeing all these people with other issues and befriending them and, spending hours upon hours engaging in threads on these groups. I would even meet some of the folks on calls and get to know them. And I met some really kind of different people, right? So there was a guy that lived in the dark because of something that a dentist had done to him. And every time I talked to him, on chats, he would repeat the same thing, which is the life he had before and how this dentist had taken everything from him. And I can just imagine how that is all he thinks about day in and day out, and how painful that must be because your entire life, as you know it, is taken from you and you blame a dentist. And he was a more extreme case, but I've also, I was chatting with a couple people. I think it was 17, where two people that I'd known and was chatting with took their own lives, and they were only in their, I think, early 30s, and they seemed like, normal people, but they couldn't get out of this tunnel that this stuff had put them in. And then I met lots of other people who lost their careers, lost their wives, lost their kids, and that was just normal. That was normal in this world. It just stripped you of the person you were and the things that you took for granted, and put you in a position in society where you felt like you were at the very bottom. And for me, who had always had a relatively easy life, went to good schools, got a good job, traveled all around the world, never had to deal with this, and all of a sudden I was in this world, right? And I was stuck in it. And when you're stuck in that world, you realize that a lot of what you were taught to believe is not true. Like, you probably thought, okay, people had a choice, and they chose to become a certain way because they were weak or they lazy, right? These are the things that we've been told. And here I was, this person who was an adult in their late 30s, extremely competitive my entire life, and, successfully competed in work, in school, and in sports. And I lost this battle. Like, it wasn't even close. When this dentist drilled my teeth, like, I was screwed. It didn't matter. Like, it didn't matter how strong I was. It just dismantled me because you lose your neurological function in part. And what I see is that this world's getting a lot darker, meaning that with every generation, this stuff gets worse and people are going to have more medical issues and the system doesn't get it. So these people just go in circles and run up more medical bills, and it becomes harder and harder for governments to pay for this. It's not hard to see how this is going to end very badly, right? Like, you just have to look at the last 30 years at what has happened to Americans to see what's going to happen to the entire world. America's going to get much worse. I remember walking around my dad's town. It's a couple hours outside in a small town outside of Seattle, walking around a Walmart, and just thinking, wow, like these people are destroyed. Everyone was huge. Nobody had a normal body anymore. And they must all be having health issues. Like when you're that big and everything's completely twisted, like health issues are a part of your life. The message that I'm trying to convey with this stuff is one of hope that this isn't how it has to be. Slide that we're seeing can be stopped and that people can be healthy and beautiful as a default. And this rocketing up of mental health issues and use of pills doesn't have to be that way. And that you can almost see a world that is almost completely without it because it's not needed. And that's the world that I see if this stuff spreads. I'm not a person who thinks like I'm going to be the one to take this to the world. That would be overly ambitious of me. But I do think that I can get a snowball started. God has blessed me with a decent head on my shoulders and an understanding of how content and social media work. I only really view that my job is to get this snowball started so that it starts rolling downhill, and then other people will pick it up along the way, right? And carry that torch downhill until it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, until it becomes something that people can't ignore. So last point is, so I understand that I write about, famous people, and maybe that seems a bit tabloidish or something, but I do it with a specific purpose. And that specific purpose is, like it or not, that kind of content does well on social media, right? And so if you want to hit a bigger audience and other people, this type of content helps. And so that is, while I do it, I do think that I do it with some good intention behind it.